So I'm on my way to work, and as is often the case with me, I'm contemplating theological and philosophical and existential ideas. And what had come to mind for me is this phenomenon of people across religious traditions, particularly the Abrahamic traditions and in Christianity more specifically, saying things like, God told me to do X, or I heard this from God, or God wants me to do Y. And I've been thinking about that quite a bit, and what that means, and even thinking about what it means to pray to God. And here's what I've come up with. At least it's a tentative idea. I'm curious to know what you guys think. Well, first I should probably identify the tradition that I subscribe to. So if you've been following me long enough, you're aware of how much I appreciate the ancient Kemetic spiritual tradition that emerged out of Africa, as it is the source of a lot of the principles that was carried over into the Abrahamic tradition, so including Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And I also identify as a Christian. Now, what that means for me is likely very different than what it means for many other Christians, but I would say I identify as a Kemetic Spiritual Christian. The Kemetic spiritualists don't like that too much because I don't completely dispense with the Christian tradition. And the more traditional Christians don't like some of my ideas too much because I don't subscribe to the idea of biblical inerrancy or complete Christian literalism. So I'm a bit of a moderate in that way. So that's just my disclosure about myself. With that being said, I'll go back to my original point. What does it mean to have God tell a person something, or for a person to assert that God told them something? Or what does it mean to pray to God? So I've been contemplating that a bit, and here's what I'm thinking about. So in Psalms 82:6, it says more or less that you are gods, you're all sons of the Most High. There is some variation of that, and essentially argues that human beings are gods. They're divine. Carl Jung, a psychoanalyst, would put it something like people are splinters of the divine. And in the New Testament, in John 10, verses 34 through 36, Jesus is being lambasted by his fellow Jewish peers, who are criticizing him for considering himself to be divine or the Son of God. And then he says, well, look, why are you lambasting me for considering myself to be the Son of God? In your scriptures it says you are gods. So you guys can go back and read that just to verify everything that I'm saying. So he's actually referencing Psalms 82:6. So if people are gods and they're praying to God and they're saying God is telling them to do particular things or carry out certain acts, it then means that, in keeping with these two passages, it then means that they are praying to an aspect of themselves. And if their prayers are answered, it often can be, one way to think about it is that aspect of themselves that is listening to the other aspect that's making the request carries out that request by way of action. So someone says, God, please bless me with a new car. That part of that person that's listening to the prayer will hopefully complete the requisite tasks and accumulate the resources that they need in order to pay for that car. And when people say, well, God told me to do X, Y, and Z, it's an aspect of the self telling them what it is that they ought to do. And so I think that's a helpful way to think about these concepts. And, one might argue that, well, people can't be gods, they can't be divine, because it's taking away from, it's equating human beings with the ultimate, supreme, and divine creator. And I think the best way to explain that is by way of analogy. So one way to think about the creator, or capital G God, let's say, is as if the creator is the ocean and human beings are droplets of water that emanate from that ocean. So it then means that the difference between human beings as God and the creator is a matter of magnitude as opposed to substance. So we've all heard the idea that, well, human beings are made in God's image and human beings are the children of God. And in any other context, let's say a human being has a child or a dog has a child, no one says that child that they bore is any different at the level of kind than the being that produced it. But a young child clearly doesn't have the power and responsibilities as their parent, for example. So the difference is in magnitude again. The difference is in power, even though the substantive nature of that being is more or less the same. So that's how I suppose you can circumvent the idea that you're committing complete blasphemy. But I think there's something to this idea, and I'm wondering, what you guys think about that. So let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I appreciate you guys listening.